it's about not being afraid to look in the mirror, because all of this work to be the best version of ourselves, we have to realize that we are beautifully imperfect, and we have to accept that about ourselves. We cannot change completely. So I think that that's the first step, and being willing to look in that mirror, see what we love, but also be really honest with ourselves about what we need to change, what we didn't do so well, but doing it in a loving and compassionate way, because we can't hope to change anybody else in the world. The only person we can change is ourselves. And so being comfortable with that mirror, loving ourselves, but being really, really honest as well.
Hello and welcome to the Unlocked podcast. I'm your host, Ricky Lock, and this podcast is an adventure on how to unlock the best version of ourselves and live an extraordinary life. If you've ever thought, what is the secret to success and why is it that some people are more successful than others, then you're in the right place. As in this podcast, I'm talking to the experts and successful people from around the world, and with my own personal stories of failure. Together, we can unlock the success in your career, business, and even your personal life too. Now don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my latest episodes released every Wednesday. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to this week's episode. Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. A great quote by Albert Einstein, and the perfect one to kick off this week's episode. This week, the fabulous Mel Loizou joins the Unlock podcast for a discussion on when fish climb trees, a simple concept to unlock the best version of yourself and to help you move from the toxic river, that place where you are unhappy and unfulfilled, to Legacy Lake, the place you want to be. I love Mel. She's an absolute fabulous human and probably one of the nicest and happiest people I've ever met. So it's a real pleasure to have her on the show. And by listening to this episode, you will learn 3 takeaways. You will learn how to go from where you are to where you want to be. We'll be able to unlock tips to become a better version of yourself and unlock how to ditch your fishnets. Yes, bear with me, the fishnets are your limiting beliefs, and you'll learn how to dive deep, have those moments of greatest challenges and when we've learned most about ourselves, and climb high, so when we have totally been awesome. It's a fantastic concept and you're going to love this episode. But before the episode starts, Mel has kindly given you, the listener of this podcast, a chance to win a signed copy of her book, When Fish Climb Trees. And if you love this episode and you would love a signed copy of this book, it's very simple. All you have to do is get a little bit creative, and we would love for you to share what your fishnets look like. What is your interpretation of your own fishnets, those own limiting beliefs? Take a picture of what it might look like, share it on social media, and tag me, Ricky Lock, and Mel Loizou in your posts. And me and Mel will go over the posts, and whichever ones we find to be the best, creative, and the most fun pictures of whatever your interpretation is of your fishnets, you will win a signed copy of the book, When Fish Climb Trees. Now, the competition will close on the 14th of March 2022, so get your entry shared on social media, and we'll announce the winner after the 14th of March. But without further ado, enjoy this episode with Mel Loizou. Joining me this week is consultant and coach who specialises in leadership development and change management. She's also an author, TEDx speaker, and soon-to-be podcast host of the Dive Deep, Climb High Leadership podcast. Welcome to the show, Mel Loizou. How are you?
I'm really well, Ricky. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And I cannot wait for this. Already Mel is smiling with this huge beaming smile. I can't wait for this. Yes, I'm very well, thanks. Yeah, what about yourself?
Yeah, I'm really good. Just at the end of my isolation period for COVID. But fortunately, I haven't been too unwell, although I might sound a little bit nasally today. So apologise to listeners for that.
Oh, bless you. Well, Mel, thank you for using your isolation time to share with the Unlock podcast. So thank you very much. Yeah, great to have you on there. And Mel, there is a reason why I wanted to get you onto the show. First, I think you're awesome. And I remember the first time I met you was at the PSA, East Midlands. And I just saw this pink. I was like, this lady looks really cool. What's all this about? And I remember, I think you have some like really cool sparkly trainers on. Yeah, and instantly you gripped me, and that was a great first impression. And you have a wonderful story and a wonderful book, which we're going to talk about. But as the title of this episode suggests, Mel, tell us, what is the fish climb trees philosophy?
Okay. So the fish climb trees philosophy is something that I have developed over time. And it really, it comes from my experience throughout my career, really. I started off managing very small teams, and I suppose some people would say that I have some natural leadership skills. I believe in teamwork. I've always been a pretty good communicator. And so I found myself after university in various managerial positions, and I was flying by the seat of my pants, if I'm honest. I just did what I thought was the right thing to do. And then I was probably in my early 30s, and I was working for a university, and we had a really good training and development manager, and he came to me one day and he said, Mel, you know what, I think you'd really benefit from some coaching. I was like, I don't know what coaching is. I was like, I've never heard of it. And he said, are you up for it? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And so he booked me some sessions with this coach, and it changed my life. It was a massive revelation. I felt like I was in this. I just came out after 2 hours and went, that was amazing. I could just talk about anything. I had a couple of light bulb moments, and that set me on my journey. And then I began a journey of personal development in all different ways. And once I started that, I found my career sort of was on a real upward trajectory, and I started to manage bigger and more diverse teams. And people always said to me, oh, you're a good manager because you manage a small team. Well, I started to replicate that and managed bigger and bigger teams. In the end, I was responsible for over 600 people across 21 different business functions. And throughout that time, I had personal development. And for me, I carved out a route for success based very much on values and teamwork and mindset, really. So when I started my business in 2015 and came up with the name, thanks to a good friend of mine, called Fish Climb Trees, I then started to think about, right, okay, what was it that made us successful, sort of the team that I'd been with? And I wanted to write a book. And so the book really encapsulates the philosophy. And the philosophy is my view of the world, my view of what makes successful leadership, because it is different for every person. And so that is how the Fish Climb Trees philosophy began. And it was really about taking people from that place of believing they can't to one where they absolutely know that they can, whether that's individually or as a team or as an organization. And it's still growing. I think with ideas like this, they continue to evolve, and as more people use it and learn about it, and I receive that feedback, so it gets tweaked. But it is fundamentally based on the idea that we all have the power to be leaders, even if we don't manage a team. Personally, we do. And that things like this should be fun, because part of that journey is the self-reflection piece, and that can be really difficult and challenging. And so I wanted to create something that was quite fun, so we could have these difficult conversations, but in a really fun way. So one of the key concepts in the book is around fishnets, the beliefs that we have about ourselves. Now, to sit down and say to somebody, actually, I have this really negative belief, is quite difficult. But actually to turn around and say, I've got a fishnet, and this is my fishnet.
Yes, yeah.
It makes it much more comfortable. And what I want to do is to spread the philosophy throughout the world if I could, but in a way that is simple and accessible and fun. And by doing that, it enables people to dive deeper than they ordinarily would do.
Yeah, I love that. And we're going to dive into this, the concept. I love it because one of the cool things I wrote down on my notes is that it's fun. It's not this corporate BS or corporate death by PowerPoint. It's a wonderful strategy of about lots. Well, I'm not going to reveal. Yeah, about 14 or 15 wonderful steps, which you'll have to buy the book or listen to Mel as we go through all of it. But we're going to dive into a couple of these in a second. One of the things that really attracted me, though, to you, Mel, was because of what you've just said there about moving people from can't to can. And also what we haven't mentioned, because I've done my research on you, Mel, that not only from that wonderful intro that we had about being a consultant and a coach, you have a wonderful life as well. You are on a wonderful journey about unlocking your own potential, but also other people as well. But not only are you a consultant and coach, but I found that obviously you are a master practitioner of NLP. You're also a kinesiologist. You are a qualified yoga teacher for children. And then, of course, obviously from reading in the book, you learn that obviously you've had over 20 years of that career at director level. So this isn't just like probably a junior kind of leadership role. This is director level, managing small and large teams. Lots of involvement with the Olympics as well, which I read from the book as well. But you've had a lot of challenging conversations. And there's points in the book where I thought, oh my God, I've been in those shoes where I've had to have an awkward and difficult conversation like that. So you are the right person to come on the show to talk about change and dealing with difficult conversations. And that is why I wanted to get you on. But I love that you're on that journey. And I quote from your book that you are helping people to fulfill their potential and transform themselves from can't to can. Now, you obviously mentioned this about your journey, but what was that initial spark that said, you know what, I am going to stop doing this? You know, well, you've been helping people at your director level, helping them become a better version of themselves. And there's a great result, which I won't reveal, but in the book, how you changed the score. I think it was like something like up to 75% increase. Absolutely fantastic achievement. But what was that initial spark that led to you leaving and creating the business of this wonderful philosophy, Fish Climb Trees?
Great question. So I had 15 years at Royal Holloway, which part of the University of London. And that was where I was so fortunate there. They supported me in a really fabulous way. They supported my development journey. And that's when I went from sort of a team of 6 to 600. But I always think that we get to a point, don't we, where it's a crossroads, really. And I reached that crossroads, and I had a choice. I could have stayed stuck, and it wasn't stuck, but stayed where I was in my comfort zone, in a beautiful location with beautiful people, doing a job that I really loved, but that wasn't necessarily challenging me. It'd always been an upward growth and a bigger and better challenge, but I really felt that I'd reached the sort of where I was going to go. So I had a choice. I could stay, or I could go and do something different. So I chose to do something different, which didn't work out as I was expecting, because I went to work for a tech company for a year, which was, oh my gosh, such a big change. And it was interesting, because I think sometimes when you stay somewhere for a long time, I know that you were Argos for a long time. Yeah. When you step out of that, it can be really difficult. And you think, actually, all the success I had, was that in my head? Was it imagined? Can I replicate that elsewhere? And so even though the tech company wasn't the right environment for me, I still managed to effect change. And after a year, we decided that it wasn't right for either of us. So there was a mutual parting of ways. And it was at that point I said, right, do I want to go and work for somebody else again, or do I want to start my business? And ever since I'd been a graduate, I'd always wanted to run my own business. So I thought, it's now or never. So I jumped and I started it, and I've never looked back. I mean, I feel so blessed to do what I do now. I love my work. I love my clients. I love all the different things I've been able to do, meeting people like you, just honestly, it's been fantastic. And it definitely isn't about the money.
Yes.
It's about everything else. And it's about a work-life balance. It's about throwing myself into what I believe that I'm good at. It's about watching other people grow, but also every day when you have your own business, as you'll know, you are learning and growing and developing. And I just love it. So
love it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, and obviously that's what's led you onto this wonderful path of obviously the fish climb trees. So obviously to kind of give you a bit of a breakdown to all the listeners here, Mel kindly gave me a book, and it's absolutely fantastic book, which I'm going to dive into later on because it has some amazing stories that I really connected with, obviously being in a leadership role myself and having those difficult and awkward conversations. But the if you could briefly explain, because it's a fantastic concept, and as I said, one of the things that really admired me to you is that it is really fun. It is not this boring death by PowerPoint concept. We had a concept that we really loved, which is very similar because you've got the values tree. We had a tree kind of concept, which was about your, back in the old Argos leadership days, about your values. And this was thanks to Matt Edward and the TDIY team, about your roots. And the roots was your values and your beliefs. And that's what's going to drive your behavior, which is like the shape of the tree and the trunk. And then right at the top of the leaves is you flourishing. And you have, like, that was like our main concept, which is brilliant. And you've got that concept already in it, but with all these other added extra bonus things, which we're going to deep dive into the fishnets bit in a minute. But to give the listeners a bit of an idea, there's about 14 different concepts, which all have bloody brilliant puns as well. The names for them are absolutely amazing. I love them. But there's lots of different things, such as obviously gratitude, visualization, about taking responsibility, understanding who we are, and a kind of thing a bit like insights as well, like with the bouncing balls. Yeah, love it. But tell us about how on earth did you come up with such a great concept that in essence is helping people go from where they are right now, that toxic river, maybe unhappy, maybe the things that's annoying people every single day, to Legacy Lake, the place where they want to be. How on earth did you come up with this amazing concept to get people from there to where they want to be?
So there are many different ways that you can write a book. You can self-publish, you can go to a publisher, many different ways. And I looked at all of those when I set the goal of writing a book. I decided that was what I was going to do. And I looked at self-publishing, and then I had a conversation with Richard Hagan, who is also in the PSA. And
same publishing company, I think, as well.
Yeah,
books, yeah, in the back of the book.
Yeah. So they are the publishers, and Richard, business partner, is a guy called Martin Pentecost, who has an amazing brain and visualization. So I worked with them on creating my book. So I knew that I wanted it to be based around the whole idea of fish climbing trees, that whole sort of impossible but possible.
Yeah.
And so I worked with Martin over 6 months. So the content and all the ideas are mine. And then together, Martin and I brainstormed how we could work a fish climb trees philosophy into the book. And it is really interesting because one of the things that I said at the outset was I didn't want my book to be an ordinary business book. I didn't want it to be something that people would pick up and, whilst be very interesting, put it down. I didn't want it to be hard going. I almost wanted it to be a book that you could pick up with a cup of tea and 2 hours later go, wow, I finished that. And although it doesn't feel like it at the time, as it's done for you, when you go away, you start mulling over what we've dived into, what I've talked about. Because for me, again, it's my belief that that's the way that we learn best. So there are laugh out loud moments in there, and there are bizarre references and all the names. Some people really embrace that, and some people just say it's too much. And as with everything we do in our life, we are never going to please all the people all the time. But I still, now that I the book was published in April 2019, so nearly 3 years ago now. I still look at that book and say, that is me in a book. So if you pick it up and read it, we're going to have a great conversation if you like it. But actually, if you go, actually, this isn't for me, that's absolutely fine, because that is my methodology when I'm coaching, when I'm consulting, you know, when I'm on stage speaking. So it's a really good insight. So a lot of it came from myself, but it was also the wonders of Martin Pentecost's mind and being able to collaborate in that way.
I think it's amazing. Yeah. And as I said, it's not the kind of typical standard business book. It's fantastic. It's littered with amazing, funny stories written in a way that just connected with me. It was almost as if I was in a conversation with you in real life. So that's the thing that really connected with me. What I love about it as well is that the drawings throughout the book as well are really fantastic. And I know that obviously in the book you have the scales, your own, I think, is it called fish scales, your own scales, which you can obviously download. And it's a beautiful painting because you get to see the whole concept. But as I was going through it, because I downloaded it this morning, it's perfect. You could literally just download that, and you've literally given in this wonderful book a blueprint to help people get from where they are now, maybe that state of not feeling great, probably in a toxic river or a toxic environment or culture at work, and then get them to where they want to be, which I think works, like you said, not just for solo people, individuals, but teams and organizations. And I'm not going to go through all of the concepts because people need to buy your book now if they want to read all that. But in particular, one of the things that I really do love about, there's lots of stuff about gratitude and slingshot, but the thing about the fishnets and beliefs and values, and I'm big about this, about what's important to people in life, but explain to the listeners about the idea of the fishnets in this concept of getting people from where they are now to where they want to be. What's the fishnet element?
So the fishnets are the beliefs that we have about ourselves. And even saying that word, I'm sure that there are listeners going visualizing one thing and other visualizing another, and it doesn't really matter, because a fishnet, whichever way you look at it, has got things you can't get through. And the idea in the book is that our fishnets are the beliefs that can keep us stuck where we are. We get tied up in them, and I'm sure you've had that experience where there's something going on and you just can't get out of your head, and it's all those messages that we tell ourselves, you know, I'm not good enough, I'm not clever enough, oh, those people don't like me, oh, I could never do that, all of those beliefs, and that's what our fishnets are. And for me, and this was the same in my own personal journey, when I managed to break through those fishnets, then that's when I could move forward. And unfortunately, we never get rid of these fishnets. That's what I've learned anyway. We're in a particular situation, we deal with that fishnet, we think, great, I've got that nailed. And then something else will happen in our lives that we've never encountered before, and it will be back again. And so it's a constant journey. But I think just being aware of them, just talking about them, and then looking at strategies as to how you deal with them is a way forward. Because so many of us, I mean, I have done sort of off the cuff research with sort of large conferences that I've been at, where I've had, I don't know, 300-400 people, and I've asked them to write down what their fishnet was. And the most popular one, unsurprisingly, is I'm not good enough. And we all experience that, I think. I don't think there's anyone on the planet that hasn't experienced that at some point in our lives. The difference is what we choose to do about it, because once we know it's there, we have a choice. We can stay stuck in our fishnet, or we can choose to break through, and we can do that in a variety of different ways. And there's not one strategy is right. It's what's right for individuals at that particular moment in their lives. And to me, it's the difference that makes the difference. And again, I think that we have our own personal fishnets, but our fishnets can inform the fishnets that we then have about other people. They can inform our beliefs as a team. We can have team fishnets, and we can have organizational fishnets as well. So hugely powerful. And again, it's a different way of looking at something that often people find quite uncomfortable talking about.
Yeah. Sorry, Mel, carry on. I was interrupting.
No, we were both going for it. We were both thinking. But I think that is, and so often people can talk about limiting beliefs, but even that word limiting beliefs it's closing down, whereas fishnets is just something that it sends your imagination into different realms, really, and it enables the conversations to take place, and that's the important thing.
I love it. I'm seeing like a visual image of like Finding Nemo stuck in a net and not just trying to get out there, but it is so important. And we used to discuss this because it is about what's important to you. And I remember in a similar situation where we were running a workshop and we were asking people to sit down and tell us what's your values, what your beliefs. And they're like, you want me to talk about myself? Yeah, sure. Oh, okay. And they go, oh, I've not really had time to think about what's important to me, because in that everyday rat race, we were always worrying about, oh, I've got to get the kids to school, or I've got to do this, I've got to do that. But when we take that step back and think, yeah, what is important to me? It's funny, isn't it, that I think, I don't know if you must experience this, Mary, in the work that you do, how many of us are actually on the right path of where we're going, but is it actually aligned with what's important to us? And I know there's a great story in your book about, and I see this a lot with a lot of organizations whose values are forced. It's not a commitment culture where we've all agreed. It's, this is what we do here. This is who we are. Come join us, like it or lump it. And that's it. And I remember, especially in my days of going into some of the stores and trying to change a bit of the culture about what's important to you. Well, this is what we do here. Right, okay, but do you believe in that? Well, not really, no. So why are you here then? So my question, I guess, here to think about this is, what can we do if, whether it's in our individuals, ourselves, or even in a lot of teams, so a lot of people who listen to this might be in a team or an organization where the values are not aligning with where the company is going, or even the team. What can we do to start to realign what's important to us to get to where we want to be?
Love that question. Love that question, because you'll get me on my soapbox about it. And the world is full of organizations that have their values listed on their website, or you can read them on the back of their packaging, or they're in their offices, but actually they mean diddly squat. Yeah. And I come from a totally different viewpoint, and it was one of the things that we did at Royal Holloway and did incredibly successfully. So I know that it works, and I've worked with other organizations since then, and it does work, but it takes time. And the starting block is actually about starting with the individuals themselves and getting them to explore what their own values are. And like you said, we don't do it. We walk around this earth, we don't think, oh, what are my values? What? Yeah. But actually, it's a beautifully simple process. And one of the exercises that I get every client that I work with that wants to work with me around their values to do is it's an exercise called What Are You Proud Of? And basically people come along with an item that represents something they're proud of. Work, personal, whatever it might be. And they talk about it. And I am yet to see anyone not moved by what people bring in, but also what they learn about people that they have been working for years, and that they never knew this. And so that's a starting point. And then it's about bringing those together and looking at what are the common threads. And again, if you look at what's out there, often values are one word. Now, that word, so the word of integrity, I might use that in a different context to you. So you've got to explore and spend time understanding the word that people have picked, but what that means to them, because by doing that, you can find the common threads. And then when you find the common threads, you can then begin to build the values of the team or the department or the organization. And then you're building something really real. And then once you've done that, that's almost the easy part. Then you have to make the commitment that that is the way that you are going to drive your business. So when we did it at Royal Holloway, the decisions that we made, the conversations that we had, how we ran our meetings, how we designed our customer service was all brought back to, are we delivering to our values? And our values at the time were fantastic, fresh and fun. But you can't guess where the fun came from. But it was, you know, we were providing a student service and that was right. But that took hours and hours of work. And I think that so often what happens, you get the senior execs in, maybe the marketing team, we need to decide our values. 2 hours later, you've got your values. And it isn't like that. You know, they're so intrinsic to who we are as organizations, that we need to spend the time and effort, because once you've done that, you've connected everyone without even knowing it. You are bought in as an individual who's been asked to contribute, who can see the connection. You've bought in, you've created that engagement, and that gives you a really, really strong foundation. As you said, Argos, that creates the roots that then go through the tree, and then creates the leaves, the flourishing, the money, profit, whatever it might be at the top. But you have to have those fundamental roots. And there are very few organizations, in my opinion, that take the time to do that. But if you do, the rewards are immense.
I agree. I think a lot of the time, and I'm not generalizing here, but certainly in my experience, I remember seeing lots of businesses I've interacted with that it's focusing on the bottom line, the income, the business. Well, actually, let's talk about the people. The people creates this culture, which then drives everything. And I remember saying to people, you know, going into stores or even meeting new people, you know, what's important to you? And they go, oh, don't you want to ask me about my work or what I'm doing in the stockroom? No, I want to ask you what's important to you. Oh, okay. You know, and I remember even having workshops with my wonderful team, the Difference Is You team. We used to sit there and we'd ask our teams to write down their values of what's important to them. And then you'd find these light bulb moments that at the end of the day saying, I didn't know that Terry likes Arsenal. Oh, right. Okay. Well, yeah, he really values his time with his family and he goes and watches football. I didn't know. I'm an Arsenal supporter too. I'm not really, but I'm just saying, right? But then they go, oh my God, I didn't realise that. And I've been working for him for 10 years. And that's the amazing thing, is about stepping back and actually looking at what's important. And again, a little passage here from your book, which I thought was bloody brilliant. It's amazing. Mel has this research in a book from, I think I've got it right, Johns Hopkins University in the US, I believe. Yep. Yes. About research on post-operative coronary care. So with heart disease, 90% of patients don't make any change to their lifestyle after surgery, which means, for this in mind, for any change to be successful in an organization, then not only do organizations need to change, but so do the people within it. And I think that's a powerful link, that this is so important. Everything is about people being human. And I've got an episode, this might be out by the time that this comes out, which I've labeled Beware of What You Become in Pursuit of What You Want. It's a classic Jim Rohn phrase. And I started to have that shift recently, thinking, what I'm doing right now, these big dreams and ambitions, TEDx, top 10 podcast, is it in line with my values and where I'm going? You know, that big dream and ambition that I want to become, I got to be aware of the person I'm going to be. You know, am I going to change that person? And is it actually fitting in line with authenticity? If I'm working with people where I cannot be 100% authentically myself, then that's not right for me. And I need to start thinking about what's in line with that. So it's one of these things, I think, that for anyone listening to this, whether you're in an organization, in a team, or even on your own in a business like me and Mel, it's really important to start thinking about what's important to you and what your beliefs and values are. But Mel, there's a great link to this, which is the TEDx. And we're going to put a link to this in the show notes. Mel has a wonderful TEDx, and this is kind of how I discovered her, from the Professional Speaking Association. And in that, you have that great phrase about the great example where you go into Dons le Noir, can't even say it. There we go. But you were talking about how Dan had to combat his own fishnets about being blind and this wonderful experience. But tell us a little bit about your TEDx. It's a fantastic story, but tell us about that.
Okay, so I love TED. I use it a lot in my work, my own personal development. I love sitting down for 18 minutes and hearing what people have to say. It is awesome. So it has always been on my list of things to do. But this is from somebody who, when she went to university, did anything she could not to speak in front of people. So I did everything that I could possibly. It was the biggest fishnet that you could imagine. I mean, I would not go anywhere near speaking in front of people. So to have gone from that to wanting to do a TEDx was a real journey. And my whole journey as a speaker has been incredible. But yeah, doing TEDx was amazing. It was a tough process to go through. I naively thought that with TEDx, you just sort of went, oh, I'd like to do a TEDx, and it fell in your lap. That's not the case at all. It was, especially I did it for TEDx Woking. It was a really rigorous process that whittled down you have to make a submission, and then you have to do an audition, and then there was a second audition, and then eventually you heard that you got through. So mine was done during lockdown as well. But the final talk was recorded at McLaren, which is just down the road from here. So that was lovely at their, I think it's their innovation center, learning center. It's an awesome place. So yes, it was really, it was a real journey to go on. And I think that, like with a lot of things that I do in my life now, if I feel that I can do better, then I will work with somebody to help me get there. So I worked with the brilliant Alan Stevens, who is a speech coach, big shout out to him, for a year, not particularly around TEDx. It was one of my goals, but just about how can I become a better speaker. And through that, he wonderfully helped me navigate my ideas around mindset, the fish climb trees philosophy, and then the key story, which is the story of my visit to Don Lenoir, which is a restaurant where you eat in the dark. And it is an awesome experience. It did massively impact my view of the world, no pun intended. And it's bringing those three layers together to talk about mindset and belief. And again, that shift from believing you can't to one where you know that you can. And central to the story is Dan, who was our waiter, who was blind and had been blind since he was a child. And just it was just a wonderful evening, and talking to him about the fishnets that, you know, he'd overcome in his mind from when he was a small boy. He knew that he just wanted to live the life that we live as sighted people. And so his fishnets actually came from everybody else thinking that he couldn't, and trying to limit him. But here he was working and living in London as you and I could do. Just an awesome story.
Which, when you think about London, it's not like a small village. It's a very busy place, isn't it? So God bless him, to be blind anyway, I can't imagine what that would be like. But in a busy hustle and bustle city, that's going to have that big fishnet of, oh my God, am I going to have a life there? So yeah, absolutely amazing that's now happened. Yeah. We'll put a link to the show notes because it is a fantastic talk, and obviously Mel discusses some of the key themes from the actual book. So we'll finish on this because the book is absolutely amazing. We will put a link in this. And one of the things I will say is that, obviously, as I said, it has resonated with me because of the toxic workplaces that I've been in, the toxic rivers, as we said. And there's also some really great personal stories, as we mentioned earlier on, but also some nice NLP little bits in there as well that I've noticed as well, which is really, really good. But one of the things that I wanted to say to finish on this, and then I've got a couple of questions to ask you, is there's a moment in there when you talk about when your daughter when she was born, and obviously being playful, creative, and going out in like funky yellow pajamas and tutu skirts and all that sort of thing, which is going to happen to my daughter soon, I think, pretty soon, right? But the idea about dealing with change, and it's just amazing. It really resonated with a similar conversation. We are taught to be just this creative and playful person, and then when you go to school, it kind of gets sucked out of you. And as I was saying to you just before the podcast, I saw Matilda last week in London. It was brilliant. And you see school uniform, and it's grey, it's dark, it's miserable. And even my own school uniform was maroon. But maroon. Who buys maroon? I don't know. But it was dark maroon. And I often think about when you don't really see a lot of bright colours, do you? But even from a young age, you are kind of stripped of that creativity, and you're just stripped to conform right within the lines. This is preparing you for adulthood. So we have no chance, do we, to kind of deal with change because we're stripped away from a young age. But I love that. That really resonated with me. And I think it is a fantastic book. Where can people find this if they want a copy of the book?
They can find it in all good let me put my teeth back in. All good online retailers. So Amazon, Foyles, all of them. The book is stocked with them all.
Fantastic. And for any listener listening to this episode, Mel has kindly donated a signed copy of this book. If you're watching this little clip, it's not this one because I've folded lots of pages in it, but we are going to give away a signed copy. Now, Mel, if someone wants to win or have a chance of winning the signed copy of your book, how can they win a copy of your book?
So thinking about what we've been talking about creativity and fishnets, I think it would be really fun to just get people to share what their fishnets look like, how they imagine their fishnets to be, because in the world of fish climb trees, there is no right or wrong. It's our interpretation of it. So I would love to see people's interpretation of their fishnets. And if they can put them on any social media, tagging in you and I, and we will award the book to whichever we think is the greatest interpretation of fishnets.
I love that. Thank you, Mel. We'll put some information in the show notes about that. Thank you, Mel. Well, look, Mel, I've got 2 questions to ask you before we end the podcast. Thank you, obviously, for coming on. You've been absolutely brilliant. What is your advice for someone that might be in that toxic river right now? The first step of not feeling happy, maybe a little bit frustrated with where they are in life. Maybe they want to get to somewhere better. What advice would you say to them right now?
Sometimes when we're in those situations, when we're feeling stuck or overwhelmed, it can really, really feel like there is no way out. We're just so overwhelmed. The truth is, there is always a choice. We always have a choice. No matter how crap something is, we have a choice about how we respond to it. And so I think acknowledging that in the first instance, and it may not feel like it. And when I'm feeling stuck, I go for a walk. So I would say if you're feeling like that, go do something that you really enjoy. Don't think about it, whether it's playing with your new baby daughter or going to watch Matilda or going for a walk or going for a swim or going to the gym. Just go do something that you really enjoy and get to that place where eventually the brain turns off. But know that you can come back and that you'll have opened the choices to what you do. Because doing what you've always done will only get you what you've always got. A well-known saying, absolutely true. Know that you can do something different and don't expect too much of yourself. Change little steps is better rather than trying to go, well, I'm going to change it all in a day. Be realistic and be kind to yourself as well. And this is a technique that I use often in my coaching. When I hear somebody really berating themselves, really stuck, I ask them to think about somebody that they really love, admire, somebody that's really close to them, and ask them, if they were in that situation, what is the advice that you would give them? And they do it. And even before they finish, they know where they're going. And they're like, oh, okay. But it works. It really works. So I think for that first step, is knowing there is always a choice. You always have the power to choose what you do.
Incredible. And my second to last question, Mel, what is your top tip for unlocking how to be the best version of ourselves?
Oh. For me, it's about not being afraid to look in the mirror, because all of this work to be the best version of ourselves, we have to realize that we are beautifully imperfect, and we have to accept that about ourselves. We cannot change completely. So I think that that's the first step, and being willing to look in that mirror, see what we love, but also be really honest with ourselves about what we need to change, what we didn't do so well, but doing it in a loving and compassionate way, because we can't hope to change anybody else in the world. The only person we can change is ourselves. And so being comfortable with that mirror, loving ourselves, but being really, really honest as well.
I love that. It's amazing. Mel, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. If people want to find out more about you and your work, where can they find you?
Well, I hang out on all the usual social media platforms. So LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. I've just got an Instagram account, so a bit slow on the uptake. Yay! So you can find me on all the usual social media channels. My website is called Fish Climb Trees. You can email me at mel@fishclimbtrees.co.uk. And yeah, love to hear from anyone that's listened and hear what they thought about the show.
Brilliant. And Mel, it'd be my honour if you'd let me. I'd love to finish our episode together with the final passage from your book, if that'd be okay.
Of course.
Perfect. I think this is a great way to sum this up. So firstly, thank you, Mel, for coming on the show. And as Mel writes in the book, remember, this is your life, your lifetime, your legacy. Don't be defined by your past or your present. Choose your future. Join the transformation revolution and choose to be the fish that climbed a tree. Brilliant. Love it. Mel, thank you very much. You've been an absolute pleasure. Good luck to you and all the best. Thank you. There we go. Thank you, Mel, for coming onto the show. You're an absolute pleasure to have onto the show. Now, don't forget, you can win a signed copy of the book, When Fish Climb Trees. All you have to do is share your interpretation of what your fish nets look like. What are your limiting beliefs? Share it on social media. Tag Mel Loizou, tag me, Ricky Locke, and we will announce the winner after the 14th of March 2022, and we'll have that signed copy sent to you. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you did like it, then head over to Apple Podcasts, share some love, or Podchaser or Spotify. Leave us a rating and a review and let us know what you think to this episode. And as always, thank you to the amazing patrons of this podcast, Sherry Brinton, Steve McDermott, Anthony Howe, and Rory Barnes for your continued support. Thank you for listening to this episode, and don't forget you get another episode of Unlocked every Wednesday. Goodbye.